Hello everybody, this is Lino Tadros, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a brand new model for an existing widget in Sitefinity. I don't need to actually recreate the controller, the widget itself, like news, blogs, events, lists, whatever. I just wanted to add new functionality by actually modifying the model itself. So let's go ahead and get started. So here's our website, nothing new, okay? Usually when you go to the MVC folder, you'll be able to create a controller for a new widget, the model and the view. But in this case here, I don't want to create a new controller. I just want to modify the way an existing widget works, like for instance, the news or the blogs. We'll do this one, for instance, for the news, but it's exactly the same technique. And keep watching till the end because there is a little bit of a tip and trick that is not very well documented at the end that you need to know about to get this to work as well. One of the first things you want to do is to actually go ahead and see how the list and the detail, for instance, for the news have been written. So I'm going to open up the resource packages, go to the Bootstrap 5 MVC views, and here you have all the folders for every single one of the widgets. And I'm going to go down to, let's see, the news. If you open up, let's say, for instance, the list.newslist.cs.html in here, I want you to notice what's happening on the first line. We'll notice we are not bringing in the specific model for the news. We're bringing in a generic one called content list view model. It will be the same model being used for the blogs, for the events, for the lists, for the news. So put that in mind as well. That might actually make your life easier instead of actually having to bring in a completely different model again when you override it. So now that we know that, let's go back to the MVC folder. I'm going to go to the model and I'm going to create two different C# files in here, one for the model and one for the view model. And I would like to start with the view model just because I want to actually inherit from this content list view model to make it very easy for me not to have to change too many things. I'm going to right click on the model, we'll say add a new class right there. And this class, we'll call it something, let's say Lino News View Model. Alrighty, let's go ahead and create one of those. There it is. And I need to inherit from a class called content list view model that comes directly from Sitefinity. Where is the namespace for this guy? Let's click on it once in Visual Studio and it will help us out to tell us where it is. And it's available in using Telerik Sitefinity front-end MVC model. Let's add that to the using clauses and we are good to go. And now I get to actually maybe bring in 1, 2, or even 10 different properties that I would like to enhance my functionality or the model with. So I'm going to just bring something simple in here to start with. This is just a part 1 video. I will have another part 2 to use something like a selector, like a library or an image or a page selector as well to show you how to deal with that. But for right now, let's just bring in one simple property is of type string and it's an automatic getter and setter. It's called my description, for instance. Sounds good? So that's my new content list view model. Now let's go ahead and create the model itself. We'll say add another class. And we will go ahead and call this class, let's call it Lino News Model. Alrighty, let's go ahead and create this one. And this guy will need to inherit from something from Sitefinity itself. And in Sitefinity, we have a news model. So we'll say news model. And by the way, this namespace for the news model is available in using Telerik Sitefinity front-end news MVC models. We'll add that as well. So this is the one that inherits the interface, which is iNews model. You'll always find an interface like iNews model, iBlogPost model, iSearchBox model. There are tons of these interfaces, but this is the implementation of it. And what I'm trying to do in here, I'm trying to say I'd like to create a brand new class that will actually add to what news model has. Plus, of course, I'll add my description. So we'll say public string my description. There you go, that's the name. And we'll still keep the getter and setter as is. All right, sounds good. For this to work really well, I will need to also override one of the functions available on the news model, which is the content list view model type. And that will be the instance of the create list view model instance. So let me go ahead and override this one as well. That is the override. And in the functionality in here, I will just need to do 3 things. One is to create a new instance of the view model. So let me create a view model. In here, we'll say view model. You can call it whatever you want, equals. And we'll create a new instance of the Lino News View Model. There you go. And it will add that, of course, all the way to the top, so we'll have access to it. We are in the same namespace for the model, so we are good. Of course, you cannot forget to change the view model description to this description that you have in here. So notice Copilot in here from GitHub is actually helping me out, which is great. That's exactly the line of code that I need to write. There is view model.myDescription equals this.myDescription. And finally, to get rid of that red line, we need to return the view model as well. And this will be done. We will done now with the view model and the model itself, and we're ready to move forward. So the question now, how will Sitefinity know when it starts up that we have actually changed the news model from the regular one built into the system to the new one called Lino? Well, it's not automatic, of course. We'll have to notify Sitefinity that this have changed. But Sitefinity, you cannot do this at any time. You have to do it very, very early on, before Sitefinity finishes asking all its questions, like, hey, do you have a special news model? Do you have a special blog post model? Do you have a event model, a new one? So where will that happen? That will happen even before Sitefinity finishes loading, during the Bootstrapper itself. So once we talk about Bootstrapper, we know we're going to have to bring in the global.asx, where we can actually implement the event for the application start. And to do that, we'll right-click on the name of the project. We'll say add a new item. And we will look for something called global, and we will find it hopefully here called the global application class, and we will add it to our project. And that's it. It will be all the way at the bottom in here, global.asx, and that's the code behind for it. Two things I'll need to do. I will need to latch on to the Bootstrap initialization event for Sitefinity itself, and then implement it to go ahead and inject or rebind our regular iNews model to our new class. So this is the only place you can do this in to make sure it happens before Sitefinity finishes loading. Otherwise, it is too late to do that. All right, let's go ahead and latch on. There is an object in Sitefinity called Bootstrapper. Let me bring in the line. That is the Bootstrapper. And let me bring in the namespace for this guy as well. It's available, I believe, in abstract. Yes, Telerik Sitefinity abstractions. And it will implement this interface, or this functionality. I'm going to say right-click in here and say generate the method for me. We'll say generate the method. All right. And now instead of the throwing of the exception, I have to decide what I want to do inside of there. All right. And this is probably the most important part of this specific video, is to be able to say Control V in here and bring in this line, front end module.current dependency resolver, and the secret here is to rebind. When I'm telling the system, hey, whenever during the load sequence of Sitefinity, whenever you ask for the implementation of the iNews model, if I don't have this line, automatically Sitefinity will give you the regular news model class that implements this, that is built into the system. But I'm actually reaching out really early and saying, no, when you are trying to load the iNews model, I would like to rebind to a completely different class called the Lino news model right there. Does that make sense? And that will happen for any other model as well, for blogs, news, even your own dynamic stuff. It will work the same way. Or just rebind based on the name of the interface. And you can have a list in the documentation of all the different interfaces. There is a list of them in the documentation. Look for the word rebind and you will see iNews model, iBlogPost model, iSearchBox model. There is tons of them that you can rebind to your own implementation of the class without having to write a brand new controller or widget or anything like that. All right, great. I'm almost done. So the model and the view model have been created. The injection early on has been rerouted to my own class. The only thing left is I need to notify the designer that I have something I would like to show, which is my description, which will not be available by default. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go back to the news. And notice if I don't have a designer view in here, it will load the automatic one, the auto-generated one coming in from Sitefinity, which doesn't know anything about my description, of course. So this is where I will go to the news in here. I will say add. Let's go ahead and create a brand new Razor syntax file. If I say designer view, it has to start with the word designer view with a capital D and a capital V. Dot, and then you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it simple. And there is a little hiccup in Visual Studio when you use this to create something that has a dot in it. When you say OK, it will get rid of everything after the dot. So we'll have to do it again. Sorry about that. So we'll say designer view dot simple, and we'll push enter. And now I got myself a brand new designer. So what does that mean, a brand new designer? It means whenever I click on the edit in the back end by going to the news widget, instead of actually having the nice looking one that has the filter and the list settings and the single item settings and all that, this is the one that's going to show up because it starts with the designer view. It will automatically show up. So let's go ahead and put something just to prove the point. I'm going to come in here. Let me format this nicely. So I have a div in here that has an internal div that has a label that says my description, and then I will have an input, and I'm using Angular in here to get to the properties collection, and you have to spell the name of the property correctly 100% like you have it in the model. Okay, so the M and the D have to be capital. If you misspell this or actually change the casing, it will not find it. The Angular model will not be able to latch on to that specific property. So this is the important part. Okay, so I'm going to save all that stuff, and I'm hoping now that if I run this and use a regular news widget, the one comes from Sitefinity, when I click on edit, I should get this designer in here. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. I'm going to compile all that, and we will run it. It will take a few seconds probably to show us the gear, but I'm going to stop the video. I'll come back after the compilation took place. All right, it compiled, and now we are back onto a home page, and I'll go down to see where my news is. Let's bring in the news. Notice I had 2 press releases inside of there. That's great. When I click on edit now, the system will find out that I have a designer view.something inside of that news folder under the MVC views. And instead of bringing in the built-in one, if I click in here, you will notice it will bring in my own designer view. And of course, you can change it so you can actually copy and paste the code from the GitHub, where it has all the different code for the UI tab set to show you all the 3. And then you can add to one of them if you would like this specific functionality. But I just want to focus on just the new property. And the reason why I'm showing you this, there is something that is unfortunately not very well documented. See, if I come in here, we'll say, for instance, Lino was here, okay? And I'll say save in there. It looks like everything worked, but if I click on edit again, you'll be very disappointed. There is no Lino was here. And if I click on advanced, it will prove to me that there is something wrong. See, these are the properties on the model, and that is the model itself. If I click on it, you will take a look at everything in here, and the word my description will not be here. That means we did not persist that property into Sitefinity. Sitefinity does not know anything on this designer that exists called my description. So that's a big problem, because you will never be able to save this to the database. What did we do wrong exactly? Well, the unfortunate part that is not very well documented is that on this class in here for the Lino News model, you will have to decorate this to be able to get all the inherited properties. Otherwise, it will only get the properties of the news model, and it will exclude the inherited one from like Lino News model. So the way to do that is to come in here and create an attribute. And inside of this attribute, I'm going to be bringing something called ReflectInheritedProperties. Okay, this is the part that will be very difficult to find in documentation sometimes. If you put this in the reflected inherited properties in front of your model class that you're overriding, it will automatically also override and actually reflect the my description itself. Let's go ahead and save this guy, compile it one more time, and I'll come back once this is done. All right, I'll go ahead and click on edit now. And there it is. I will say Lino was here, and we'll say save. And you will notice at this point, if I go back, it will persist. So that is the part that the reflect inherited properties did for us. And you want to make sure that actually when you click on advanced, you go back in here to the model, you have to be able to see the my description right there. If you don't have it, that's probably that the reflected inherited properties was not added to the class for the model itself. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the part 2 and part 3. Part 2, I'll show you how to actually take advantage of this my description in the view itself. And then the third one, we'll do something a little bit more powerful, like selectors, like library selectors or image selector or page selector in the designer view, because it will require a little bit more work to actually make that happen as well. So see you again soon on Lino TV. Thank you.